Brittany here with RnA ReSet, and I am so excited to introduce to you all Dr. Taylor Wallace. Dr. Taylor Wallace is the CEO of Think Healthy Group. He's a professor at George Mason University. He's been a guest star on the Dr. Oz show. He's just a fabulous human being. We're so excited for him to be here today. He focuses a lot on what we're putting into our bodies. He actually has a cookbook, Cooking and Sizzling Science, right? So that's a lot of what he's based off of. And he's actually a contributor to the men's health book. So he's got a lot of really awesome information in it. And today we're going to talk about a little bit of it. So welcome, Dr. Wallace.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. We're so excited. You have so much knowledge, and it's just exciting to hear it. And our viewers are going to I know they're going to soak it in. Like, I've enjoyed reading it. They're going to love to hear it. So first I want to know, I know you've done some work with Dr. Oz, but how did you get in contact with Dr. Carolyn Dean?
Oh gosh, so I met Dr. Dean through another magnesium researcher, Andrea Rosenoff. Dr. Dean was looking for someone to run her clinical study on ReMag, her absorption study, and Andrea recommended Think Healthy Group and myself to do that. We're a research firm, and we have pretty extensive knowledge in the area of magnesium. It's been a real exciting field the last few years. So we've played a lot in this area, and so I met Dr. Dean and just kind of fell in love.
Who doesn't? She's amazing.
Right. And, she really believes in science, and she believes in funding good science. And I think that really separates a lot of her products from others.
Absolutely. So you talked about doing a study on, the ReMag magnesium. Can you tell us a little bit about what you found?
Well, so as you know, ReMag is a picometer-sized, ionically charged magnesium chloride molecule, which is very unique for two reasons. One, magnesium, when it's chelated as a salt, which is what's in dietary supplements, it's very large and bulky, which is why you have to have your own pill normally. The picometer size is very similar to what's in plants. And we confirmed that size in our study. And it's thus it's easily absorbed, and so it produces less laxative effects than something like a magnesium oxide that's cheap but all over the market and not really absorbed. In regards to the ionic charge, I mean, Dr. Dean can tell you, a little bit more about that, but it all comes down to getting magnesium into the cell. And so basically our study was really a proof of concept study. And when we started out, I was kind of saying to Dr. Dean, I don't know if you want to invest this much money in this study because, I think there's a high possibility it's not going to work here. And, we ran the study and she was exactly right. I mean, we found basically that ReMag was able to, just in one 300 milligram dose, raise ionized magnesium levels in the blood. And we haven't really seen that with any other supplement out there, at least that I'm aware of to date. And to me, that's the combination of the picometer size and the ionic charge of this magnesium. So it's a really novel chemistry innovation that I think will have some really good public health implications in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, I love hearing that. The she knows what she's talking about. Like, never doubt Dr. Dean. She knows.
I always love when a scientist is actually the CEO of a company that's, founded upon nutrition. It just kind of makes sense, that scientists should be the ones running things.
Yeah, we say that all the time. We're like, we are backed by a doctor. Like, she's literally running the show, and that really sets the RnA ReSet formula line kind of apart from so many other options out on the market.
Right.
So we will actually post a link to that study because I think it's really important and there's a lot of information to learn about it. So you can look for that in the comments. Um, in your book, you talk a little bit about muscle health and magnesium and how it supports muscle health. So, I mean, why do we need magnesium for our muscles? Like, what's the importance?
Right. So when your muscles contract, there's an important compound called myoglobin, and magnesium is basically the center of the myoglobin molecule. And so it's really important in muscle contractions. Now, your heart is also a muscle. So when you think about like heart health, magnesium is pretty critical in that regard. But for sports nutrition, what we're really talking about is, all these smaller clinical studies that are showing potential effects of magnesium as an ergogenic aid that can help you enhance athletic performance. And actually, Dr. Dean funded recently a study that we're just about to begin where we are actually doing muscle biopsies in professional athletes. So we're actually taking pieces of muscle from these athletes after we supplement them with ReMag, and we're looking at their mitochondria function. Mitochondria are the energy producing organelles inside the cell, if you remember back to basic biology. And
Right.
we have this theory that magnesium is super critical in maintaining adequate mitochondrial function, which is important as we exercise, but also as we age. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's a study that I'm super excited to get started. And I think we're going to find some really neat things because most of the studies, out there just give a supplement and then they say, well, how much weight can you bench press? How many reps can you do? How long can you run? This actually puts some biology behind those studies. And so we're really excited to be working on that with Dr. Dean and ReMag.
That's so exciting. I can't wait to see the results. I'm confident that it's going to be something amazing. So that would be really neat to explore more about, I like that you say backing it by biology. That's a great way to it just proves the point even more. It's the best
Right.
way I can sum it up.
Well,
So,
and what's really novel is again that picometer size and ionic charge that can help
mhm,
get that or potentially help get that magnesium into the cell.
yeah.
So that's, what it's all about is actually getting the magnesium into the cell. A lot of the magnesium in the blood is bound to albumin, which is a protein, and it's not really bioactive. It can't really do anything once it's bound to
Mhm.
that protein. So I think there's some potential here.
Oh, so exciting. So exciting. So, okay, another big thing with muscles and minerals is, and here, like, I have seen so many different opinions on this, so I'm interested to see what you have to say. But calcium and magnesium are two very important or minerals, especially for your muscles in bone structure and all kinds of things. But there needs to be a balance of some sort. And what does that balance look like?
The issue is about 45% of Americans don't get enough magnesium from food, whether it's through depleted magnesium levels in the foods we eat because of farming practices and depleted magnesium in the soil, or because we consume a lot of processed foods that magnesium is the center of the chlorophyll molecule, and chlorophyll's in plants. So if we have a lower intake of plant foods, we typically have a lower intake of magnesium. So again, it's all about balance. And in the cell, magnesium is an intracellular cation. It has a calcium channel blocking effect. A lot of times, magnesium and calcium are competing to get inside the cell. So having that balance is really important. Now, I'm a bone health researcher, so I recognize the importance of both nutrients. I mean, obviously, calcium is super important to bone as well as magnesium. And so it's good to kind of spread your supplementation out throughout the day, especially if
Mhm.
you aren't eating a lot of dark green leafy vegetables, and in the case of calcium, dairy foods, to
Mhm.
spread all that out and really diversify your diet and supplementation regimen so that you do get the right amounts of both nutrients.
Yeah, I like that you said that because sometimes you just want to take it all at once and be done for the day, and you're like, "Yep, I'm good, easy fix." But
Right,
spreading it out and the importance of that was it's great insight. Great
right,
insight. So, one last question. I understand that you're doing some research on magnesium and COVID susceptibility. With
right,
this being such a hot topic, especially, I mean, even a year and a half later, it's still all over the news. That's all y'all hear
right.
about. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you're finding in that connection between the two?
Yeah, so when the pandemic first started, I kind of sat down and recognized right away that magnesium may have a role in, preventing and treating COVID-19. And for a couple of reasons. If you remember early on in the pandemic, vitamin D was one of the
Mm-hmm.
first nutrients to really make, the news and headlines. That it could potentially cure the common cold or decrease symptoms of the common cold, and therefore it might be, um, or the flu, and so, therefore it might be useful with, COVID-19. Then we saw some retrospective studies of vitamin D come out and suggest, that maybe patients with higher blood levels of vitamin D were less susceptible to infection, but also ended up with less severe cases. And
Mm-hmm.
as a magnesium researcher, we know that magnesium controls blood levels of vitamin D. So if 45% of Americans are low in magnesium, you don't really change your vitamin D blood levels if you're inadequate in magnesium. So that was the initial thing. The second piece was early data out of Wuhan, China, showed that a very high portion of patients in critical care had hypokalemia, which is low blood potassium. And that is also very much regulated by magnesium. You can't actually just give a intravenous injection of potassium and your blood levels go back to normal. You first have to replete the person in magnesium. Now, we don't really measure magnesium in the clinical setting, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's very scant data there, but I'll talk about some of our upcoming data that really, confirms this. So that was kind of the second piece. The third piece is we know that magnesium is very critical to the renin-angiotensin system, which is how your body regulates um, fluid, but also how it regulates, heart rhythm, um, blood sugar levels, and blood pressure in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And so the renin-angiotensin system is also where the ACE2 enzyme, which remember where COVID-19 binds to, is the ACE2 enzyme. And so when that ACE2 enzyme is bound, you get a lot of downstream inflammation and cytokine production. And you've heard all over the news, about the different inflammatory cytokines that are extremely elevated during COVID. So the third idea was that, magnesium could block some of that in the renin-angiotensin system. Now, calcium, on the other hand, seems to aggravate that. So you get an influx of calcium into the cell, and you get a buildup of this inflammation because there's no magnesium there. And remember, magnesium has a calcium channel blocking effect, so it blocks some of that calcium from going into the cell. Now, what happens is calcium is an extracellular um, ion, so it's outside of the cell. Magnesium is inside of the cell. And so, really regulating that calcium going into the cell during COVID-19 has proven to be really, really critical for treating patients and decreasing the severity. So, and actually, the study doesn't have, its primary focus is not magnesium, but Dr. Dean helped fund the study anyway, along with Nestle Health Sciences. We have one of the largest longitudinal studies of ICU patients. So when an ICU patient comes into the ICU, they're immediately documented, and we have a registry system where we capture all of the nutrition care practices that dietitians in the ICU across the U.S. use, to treat their patients. So whether it's, blood magnesium levels are checked, or whether it's potassium, or whether it's the type of enteral tube feed that they're given, or, whether they're, have a high BMI, a low BMI, or older, younger, there, thousands of variables that dietitians across the US are entering into our system. And what that really does is that enables us to cluster things and look at which standard care practices equate to better health outcomes across all different types of ICU centers across the nation. And so magnesium is just a small piece of that, but it's something that Dr. Dean is also funded, and I think is going to produce some really, really neat results. We also are doing some what we call retrospective review of electronic medical records, where we're looking to see in the Indiana University Hospital system if people who had measured, if they had, had a blood magnesium measurement within 6 months of contracting COVID, did they end up with more severe or less severe based on their magnesium level in the blood. So there's a couple things we're doing in regards to COVID-19, and these studies, they take a long time because they, they're sick patients, and so we had to go through a very extensive review process by, an ethics committee before we could begin, and then, we had, for the ReStore study, the ICU study, we had to recruit. I think we're at 12 centers, 12 ICU centers at 12 hospitals all across the U.S., both big units and small units, and very diverse in their geography and skill levels of the health professional. So it's going to be a really neat study. The retrospective data from the ICU, from the Indiana University healthcare system is going to be really neat as well. I think it'll give some harder data when it comes to, having your magnesium levels checked prior to disease onset. So I think the, rate of contraction will be really interesting there. Whereas I think the severity and outcomes, of the ICU study are going to be really interesting, for the ReStore study. So lots of great stuff going on with magnesium that really started based on, Dr. Dean, funding our first clinical trial, and, us just kind of sitting around the table saying, hey, I think we've got something here.
You just blew my mind, for one. Like, you hear all the time that, yeah, there's being these studies to do this or studies to do that, but to like get a little bit of an in-depth idea of what that is actually going on is insane. Like, that is so cool. I'm so excited that this is all being studied. Like, I just figured studies.
Yeah, I do these kind of webinars from my bed because I was up at, 3 o'clock this morning dealing with ICU centers across the US. So it's a crazy magnesium life, but it's worthwhile. It's a great field, and there's so much we don't know and so much possibility.
Yes. Well, we thank you for all that insight that you just gave us and all of that, and for you taking the time to just share your knowledge, on magnesium, on calcium, on muscle health, all these really important aspects into our overall health as a whole. You gave us a very, a different outlook than some people do, just because you are a doctor and you are actively researching and studying magnesium and even COVID and all these minerals. So you're in it every single day. So you have such a great insight.
Well, and one of the things I talk about on my website, if you're interested, you can visit drtaylorwallace.com. If you download my cookbook, Sizzling Science, you can get it for free on the website if you subscribe. But I talk a lot about magnesium and its interaction with other nutrients, because we often in nutrition like to think of things in isolation, but the body is very complex and multifactorial. And so we need to think about that from a nutrition standpoint.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great idea. I was gonna look up your cookbook after, 'cause something I'm getting into, learning about my nutrition, all that. But thank you for sharing on where to get that.
Yeah.
Well, Again, we just want to thank you so much for joining us today. For all of our viewers, everyone watching this video, feel free to click on some of those study links that we're going to post in the caption. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Our social media, our support team, we're all here to help out. You can also head to our website, rnareset.com, if you want to learn more about all these fun minerals that we're talking about. And of course, you want to be on the lookout for Dr. Dean's Men's Health book because it is loaded with new information like what Dr. Wallace has talked to us about today and so much more. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next time.